Hello everybody, welcome back to my Pokemon review series. In this episode we're going to be going over one of the newest additions to the game. Not quite the newest, but one of the newest. The Quagsire. Now, Quagsire, water type, which means he's slumbering sleep style, as is pretty typical. Water type has a lot more exceptions than other typings do, but this guy is not one of the exceptions. He's got the ingredient specialty, which is particularly interesting because being a water type, he can be paired with Suicune, which is one of the most interesting things in the game. And it adds more viability to a Pokemon to be able to be paired with a legend. And one interesting thing about Suicune in particular is that it's got the strongest berry type, which makes it so that its skill naturally works the best with how the skill works. It naturally it procs amount of skills, which means it doesn't care about speed, which means the berry types that work best with it are the berry types that have a higher value but slower speed Pokemon on average. And as you can see, Quagsire is a pretty slow Pokemon. And being ingredient specialists also rely heavier on higher value procs than many procs. Which means that the skills, or the specialists that are going to work the most with Suicune's main skill are ones with higher berry values and ingredient specialists, unless you're trying to overstack, which is a bit of a different tactic. But if you want to run it for just strength during the week, ingredient specialists are going to get the most value out of those skills. And Quagsire being an ingredient specialist that relies on very strong procs, in fact, these procs are some of the strongest ingredient procs you can get in the game, it pairs really nicely with Suicune. So, there's something to be said about that trait in it. Now, it's got the self-rechargeability, which I really, really like on ingredient specialists. Gives them a lot of flexibility to swap them out as you need more ingredients, and if you find that you have just like over 100 of the 2 ingredients that he makes, or over 100 of the 1 ingredient that he makes, you can just swap them out. He's got the energy, he's not going to be hurting for it, so yeah. Now, 19% is a little bit low of an ingredient rate for the Quagsire, especially with a speed as low as 56 minutes and 40 seconds. But it doesn't really matter because his procs are big, and I'll eventually be getting to that. Now, 16 inventory is a little bit small for a 1-stage or 2-stage Pokemon, because that only gets to 29 or 21 with evolution and 29 after ribbons, which is a bit on the lower side, but not super terrible, especially with the lower speed like this. That inventory is going to be filling at a lot lower of a rate than what it would otherwise. It can be a bit of a problem if we're talking level 60, if it gets the sausage proc. Then the sausage proc, 1 proc of sausage is 12 sausages. If you roll that 3 times in a row, that's 36 sausages. Without any inventory sub-skills, every single Quagsire is going to have a full inventory after that. Now, the odds of rolling 3 sausage rolls in a row is pretty low, and also people aren't really targeting sausage on the Quagsire anyway, but something to be said for comparison of just what that lower inventory really means. Now, the Quagsire is kind of interesting in the sense that it doesn't rely on a high ingredient rate or even a high speed to give procs. Like, Blastoise relies on a high ingredient rate, same with Golem. Gengar is one that relies on a high speed to produce a lot of ingredients. Quagsire is unique in that it has valuable ingredient procs rather than a high speed or ingredient rate. So if we get looking down here, it's got the Mono Mushroom build, which is something that players desired for a very long time before its introduction. But it also has potatoes and sausage for its B and C ingredients respectively. And interestingly, now the highest value list, interestingly, is actually having not the mushrooms in the 3rd slot, but is having the potatoes in the 3rd slot. Now, the 2nd slot, the mushrooms, is way outperforming the potatoes. But it's just intriguing to me, I guess. But I do think that a lot of these ingredient builds are pretty interesting, except for you really don't want the sausage in the 3rd slot. If we get looking at the synergy here, sausage and potatoes do have a little bit of synergy with the Defiant Coffee Dressed Salad, now that that's come out, but I really wouldn't recommend doing an ABC list for a meal with this many ingredients, because With an ABC list, you're not making 22 potatoes a day and 28 sausages a day, even with the most pristine stats. Maybe, like, the absolute perfect Quagsire could do it, but I doubt that. It would need to be supplemented by something else. So, I really wouldn't recommend it, and really what you want the Quagsire for is the mushrooms. Now, mushrooms just got a little buff with the hidden power perk up stew, because before, mushrooms weren't really in many of the top salads. They were ninja salad, but you only needed 12. So, now that you need 23 for the top mushroom meal, it actually necessitates a really strong, dedicated mushroom farmer if you want to be getting that. So, him having the mono mushroom build is very important. Not necessary, per se, because Gengar, despite having a lower ingredient rate and smaller ingredient procs, and not having it at level 1, actually comes pretty close in comparison to this guy. If we just make a quick little comparison here, you can see that at level 60, the Gengar actually... well, interestingly, now that Vikavolt's out, apparently ABB Vikavolt outproduces Quagsire. I didn't even know that until just seeing this. That's a very interesting thing that I see nobody talking about. But, aside from that, the Gengar is only, like, it produces, like, 4 less per day at base, which, if I just do some calculations on my side monitor here, the Quagsire only outproduces the Gengar by about 8.4%, roughly, based off the numbers that I have right here, which 8.4% isn't that big of a difference. That's about the difference of Help Speed S, just over, but, so, like, a Gengar with Help Speed S is going to produce about the same amount of mushrooms as a Quagsire without Help Speed S with the mono list. So, I mean, while there is something to be said about the power of mono mushroom here, I don't think it's absolutely necessary since there are other alternative options. Now, one ingredient list for the Quagsire that I find to be really interesting is just honestly any of these with potatoes, particularly the ABA and the AAB. Now, the AAB is the highest, strongest proc, as I was stating earlier, but the proportions aren't quite right for what I'd be looking at with the ABA. I think the ABA is kind of a slept-on option here. If I caught an ABA Quagsire with good stats, honestly, I'd hold on to it because I think it's kind of neat. Because if you look at this Spore Mushroom Curry, now I've ran this Spore Mushroom Curry quite a bit, and it is shockingly strong for being just 2 different ingredient types. And the ABA Quagsire is pretty close to the right proportions to be making this meal consistently on its own. Which, yeah, it's a weaker meal, but it's being made by a single Pokemon, which I think the ABA Quagsire is honestly one of the only options that can make a meal above 4,000 by itself. I mean, A, B, C Blastoise theoretically can make Contrary Meat Salad, but the proportions aren't quite right. Like, I don't think any of these, aside from that, are possible with just one Pokemon. Maybe the Hustle Protein Smoothie, but even that's lower. I know ABA Absol can make the Petal Dance Chocolate Tart, but that, like I said, it's weaker than the Spore Mushroom Curry. So, like, I think it's just something interesting, and a lot of people aren't really noticing. And the fact that you make it with just one Pokemon gives so much flexibility for the rest of your team to run very strong berry specialists. Long game, it's probably not worth it, especially now that we have stronger meals. This has kind of been power crept a little bit, but I think it's an interesting option. And good options, the way that I look at power creep in this game, good options are always going to be good. They may not be the best in the future, but they're not going to, like, retroactively nerf any of these meals. They're just no longer going to be the best option. You're still going to be able to reach the same highs that you could have before the new higher power options were introduced. It's just now there's more potential with the higher power options. So I'm not really afraid of power creep, especially on things like this. I just think it's interesting to just mindlessly be like, okay, it's a curry week, slap Quagsire on the team, meal taken care of, now I can just worry about the rest of my team. not a zero thought process, zero prep work, zero thought process. I think it's interesting, and especially if you have the mushrooms on a Gengar, then I think opening up the Quagsire for this opportunity is just kind of cool. So, Quagsire exists at a lot of islands. You can find him at Cyan Beach, Top Hollow, the Old Gold Power Plant, the new one. And I'm pretty certain the same is true for Wooper. However, I did not check. Yeah, he's also at the Old Gold Power Plant. I knew he was at Top and Cyan, at least, but they also are both at Greengrass. But Greengrass isn't the best place for hunting something specifically. Top and Cyan are really where you want to be going. Maybe the Old Gold Power Plant as well. But yeah, that's about everything we said about the Wooper, and I hope you have enjoyed the video and learned something. Thank you.